Okay, so design is strange. It helps us experience.
Products can be more than just perform a function and look a certain way.
It communicates. It solves problems.
They can offer us a new perspective on how we see the world.
And we barely notice it. But sometimes we do notice it. And sometimes it single-handedly wipes out $2 billion from a company. Ladies and gentlemen, Snap, the company behind Snapchat, recently announced their new AR glasses. And what is this? Their stock dropped almost 10% in a single day after this news, and I can't believe that this is a real interview. Time and time again, we are reminded that design is important, and how good a piece of tech looks matters much more than we actually realize. Ladies and gentlemen, today I'll be going over some of the worst tech designs in recent history. Some were awkward, some were pretty cool but ended up being commercial failures, and some were straight up terrible, and all of them completely necessary to get to where we are now. So let's start with a classic. BlackBerry was the smartphone before the smartphone, and at their peak, the company had about 20% of the global mobile smartphone market,
BlackBerry,
and over 50% of the US market.
Our value is unmatched.
Known for their physical keyboards and excellent security, BlackBerries were the original I'm richer than you phone.
iPhone all the way, why are you having an Android? Like, go get your money up.
It even had its own holster. BlackBerry Bros were sort of the ancestor of the modern LinkedIn Bro, but in 2007, Apple introduced the iPhone. At first, people at BlackBerry were like, we can chill because our business customers still love our physical keyboards.
We create the world's best keyboards.
iPhone sales, however, didn't care because they continued to increase. And suddenly, the future was glass and touchscreens. Physical keyboards started feeling outdated, and BlackBerry were facing a ton of pressure from its customers. They rushed to find a solution. And the result was a touchscreen device that also served as a gigantic button. The entire display physically clicked when you pressed it, and you had to feel the mechanical click to register the tap. Now, I'm not really sure what BlackBerry were smoking when they designed this. But I do understand the intention. They wanted to keep what people loved about their phones, the physical clicks. So instead of fully committing to a pure touchscreen experience, they tried to merge the old with the new, and it was a commercial failure. The problem was that it sat in an awkward middle ground, not fully tactile and not fully fluid. The BlackBerry Storm reveals something interesting about design. Sometimes companies end up designing more from fear and less from conviction in their idea. And doing anything from fear rarely produces beauty. Now, before Apple gave us 8 billion updates to Siri,
introducing Apple Intelligence, even more useful and delightful.
they've always been renowned for their hardware design.
This is what it looks like. Isn't that amazing?
With every design choice being intentional and user-focused. The Magic Mouse 2, however, well, I'm not really sure what it was focusing on. On the surface, it is beautiful, a single curved, glossy surface that looks like a spaceship. It has no visible buttons, and looks incredibly clean, and connected to a Mac, it makes scrolling and switching between apps so smooth. Until the battery dies. Because the charging port is on the bottom, which means when you plug it in, you have to flip the mouse over while it charges, like a turtle.
Oh my god, bro.
Making it completely unusable. Now, there is a theory that Apple made this design choice intentionally because they wanted to prevent people from using the mouse with a cable plugged in. As if they're saying there's only one way you can use this mouse, and if it's not the Apple way, then f you. And with every Apple product, we have the Apple fanboys smoking a bunch of copium and producing some incredible theories. Apple, however, has never officially confirmed the reason why they did this, but it did feel like they were prioritizing aesthetics over the actual usability. I mean, it was released in an era of butterfly keyboards, MacBooks becoming thinner for absolutely no reason, and ports being removed. The headphone jack also got removed not too long afterwards, and minimalism was being taken too far. Now, I know, the charging time itself isn't actually that long, but why does it have to be unusable during this time? This is just a terrible design choice. When Apple launched the iMac G3, it was an incredible experience. It was the era of bright and colorful translucent plastics. Not only was it super easy to use, but it was also beautiful. But it came with a very strange mouse. A mouse that was a perfect circle, also known as the hockey puck. Now, I'm not really sure what the puck. Apple seems to always smoke before designing mice, but it's clear that good ergonomics are not their first priority. With a diameter of about 7.6 centimeters, using this mouse would hurt your hand after a long time because most people need to clamp on it with their fingertips. It looks very cute, but according to a lot of people that used it, it was very hard to orient it. You could never tell which direction it was facing, and if you rotated your hand slightly, your cursor would just fly off the screen. And not to mention, the cable was weirdly short, even if it was meant for the G3. Look, a mouse really only has one job, to point accurately, and it failed to do that. Ladies and gentlemen, what the f is this? The SafeType vertical keyboard was released in 2002, and it is a highly specialized ergonomic keyboard designed to eliminate wrist injuries by placing your hands in a strict vertical position. But it looks less like a keyboard and more like something you'd use to fly a plane. Instead of laying your hands flat like a normal keyboard, the SafeType rotates your hands vertically so that they face each other. There are mirrors so that you can see what you're typing. Now, to be fair, the intention behind this thing was actually pretty noble. Typing all day destroys your wrists. The issue is that good design isn't just about solving a problem. It's about solving a problem without creating new ones. And it was just not very convenient to use. It's one of those products that's probably technically better for you, but sometimes the best solution is not the most efficient or the most technical. It's the one that people will actually use. Minimalism is powerful. Some of the most elegant products ever made are incredibly simple. But here, Apple really said, "F it. How about we remove everything?" Apple removed every single button, no volume controls, and no way to switch songs. It's kinda like if a car company released a car without any doors, a steering wheel, and a windshield. Now, you might be asking, how do you switch songs then? That's a good question. Well, you needed to use the Apple branded earphones, the ones with the buttons. This means that if you are poor and used a dirty little Sony, then you won't be able to navigate to your favorite song. Now, I'm not really sure how this passed the initial design meeting. On paper, this probably looked genius. The music player becomes almost invisible. It's a tiny silver rectangle with nothing but a headphone jack. And I do kinda like how these looked, because they were super compact. You could just turn it on and just listen. But it was a weird ass design for its time and virtually useless if you didn't have the earbuds. Nokia was one of the greats. They gave us the brick. They gave us the memes. But did you know that during the early 2000s, they went absolutely ham on some wacky phone ideas? The Nokia 7600 was one of them, and it looked like a leaf. I'm not sure why they chose this shape, but phone designs were pretty much a free-for-all at this point. Released in 2003, it was one of the lightest 3G devices on the market. The keypad wrapped around the display in an oval-like shape, which meant texting on this thing would feel less like communication and more like playing Tamagotchi. So as you could imagine, it was pretty difficult to use this with one hand. It was largely considered a commercial failure, selling fewer than 150,000 units globally. The awkward ergonomics and mediocre specs meant that it lost a lot of mass market appeal to the majority of people that just wanted a good, reliable phone. But I actually kind of love it, because the 7600 represents something that was lost with modern designs. Back then, companies were still willing to be weird. They were willing to risk failure. And while most crazy ideas don't work, one of them eventually does, and pushes the industry forward. The Nokia N-Gage was another one of Nokia's crazy ideas. Otherwise known as the taco phone, Nokia wanted to combine the phone and gaming console in one, but it was much too early for its time. Released in 2003, smartphones didn't exist yet. Most people carried separate devices for gaming, music, and communication. So the idea of an all-in-one device was unfamiliar. The earpiece and microphone were mounted on the sides of the phone, which meant when you called somebody, you had to hold it sideways against your face like a taco. The keypad was only on one side of the device, which meant you were probably going to be typing with one hand. And of course, if you wanted to change the game, you had to open the whole phone up and remove the battery. The N-Gage had a good idea, but of course, simply combining two things doesn't automatically create something better. It needs to be usable. The N-Gage didn't fail because the idea itself was bad. It failed because it underestimated how much people value convenience. And finally, we have the infamous Humane AI Pin. The AI Pin was a square, screenless, wearable device designed to replace the smartphone. By using AI, voice commands, and a laser projector. It had no screen and no apps. It completely bet on a future of wearable tech, which wasn't at all unreasonable, especially when you consider how popular smartwatches were becoming. Instead of apps, the device connected users directly to an AI, and the projector displayed text, dates, and images onto the user's palm, and they would interact with it by speaking or using gestures. And despite the hype, the device ended up a commercial failure. It was a $700 nipple attachment that was unreliable, laggy as hell, and incredibly inconvenient, especially because you needed a permanent internet connection. You were very limited in what you could actually do with it, and your phone was just easier to use. Putting a shit ton of smart tech is all well and good, but if it doesn't look cool, isn't socially acceptable, and fails to seamlessly integrate into everyday life, it's gonna be hard to win consumers over. Despite its failure, the hype around the Humane AI Pin reveals something deeper about the time we currently live in. A lot of us are still wondering, what comes after the smartphone?